Welcome to Mindful Drawing. I'm Robert, and I'll be your guide on this meditative practice that enters a space of mindfulness through the act of drawing. This week we'll create a window for ourselves, an aperture through that page, the blank white canvas, if you're using a piece of paper, and let that open up to whatever the imagination brings. A light technique, a little playfulness and moving, and see if we can't conjure up some kind of landscape beyond that panoramic, wide opening window. And that window exists in something. We can bring a little medium to it, a wall, some materials at the edges, something within the space to balance that without, or let it be a blank cut through the page into what might hide within as we use attention to those edges, mindfulness to how we move the pen or pencil, our breath and ease to root out something in that panorama. This one's a bit more of a free drawing, some guidance on kind of getting into the place, establishing, breathing. You can follow along with the scene that I draw, but it's something that unfolds from the imagination, so feel free to let whatever is in your mind unfold. A scene in space, a scene on Earth, something close, something far, something simple or complex. I'm just going to work with a felt tip pen and a piece of Bristol paper here. Having a little movement with the paper could help, but mine's taped down and it seems it'll work just fine for the exercise. So go ahead and gather your supplies, establish your space, and let's draw together. This morning I was inspired in sketching about framing a window, but maybe giving it a little exaggeration, so kind of a very wide or wraparound window. So we'll start with a bit of establishing the scene, working a little to the interior, and then have some free play to think about what happens outside that window. Probably mostly pen, unless there's any little construction stuff, just so it's nice and darker to see, but anything will work. A big part of it will just be framing the canvas, a space on the page, and as a warm-up to start thinking about it. Right, a window could be many things, and feel free to take this in any way you like. Right, we could have a window that's just some rectangle with some glass in it, and with a few simple lines, begin to think about a little bit of perspective-ish feeling or frame around it. Yeah. A little window framing, right? A very literal window that might be in a house. You could also think of it more as just an opening from one side of something to the other. Very simply a panoramic frame in place. And with a little editing there, lightly showing how the edges work to hold the medium there, maybe glass or whatever. Start to set it off from the page would be an option. Maybe get a little porthole and start to think about all the layers to that. A different kind of framing of the landscape outside. Something round. Little dots, doing it kind of quick to think through different ways of putting an aperture through a surface that we can work with on the page. The one that I think I'll work with, some exaggerated distortion to make it feel a little bit like it's wrapping around our vision. The top and bottom edge, a bit of a curve to it. Screen, window enveloping us, maybe just a very wide angle lens. Its edges, mostly vertical still, or things start to look a little funny, but you have a little bit of a camphor, of a bow tie shape, an axe head shape, and then work in some foreground and background to that, but all similar things. There's always, it's holding something, so maybe a lightly doubled edge where we can see it in the perspective, maybe bringing out a little ledge, maybe some framing or some depth, and see where that goes. So as I transition over, just deciding for yourself how you'd like to establish a frame on the page. think I'll work with just one, just in the canvas as a centerpiece to think through, spend a little time in the space around the frame, and then the majority of the time within the frame, having a little scene develop. But it's that finding a place, sitting in a space, and opening up to the view that we're bringing into our practice of mindfulness and attention, letting it unfold a little bit in the brain. So as you feel out the page, get comfortable with where you're sitting, just make sure everything's accessible, nothing too turned. If you have a nice free place instead of the taped down, you might be able to move the paper to accommodate your positioning. If it's a book or something, work with what it brings. Just going to take a couple of breaths to feel comfortable and present with that empty canvas, the paper. Know in my mind, in my imagination, a little of what I see there, but also let it sit lightly. Things may come and develop with it along the way, which we don't always expect. And then to start off, choosing a corner. I'm going to work in the top left, and I'm just going to frame my nice long arcs, the wraparound feeling first. Going for very wide aspect ratio. And just let that hand move along the paper. If the line wobbles a little, it's okay. It'll be engaged with several times. A light division between top and bottom should become a division between inside and outside as we go along. These first few marks establishing the paper, just giving the hand some freedom to move. I'm going to go ahead and frame the bottom edge in curved or straight, something you can play around with. It's not perfectly symmetrical due to stance or anything, that's fine. It's a loose environment, but it roughly has corners aligned towards each other at the outside edges. We can bring them together with a straight or just slightly bowed out line, exaggerating that edge of our perception, a little bit of a wide angle, framing out this larger window wrapping around us. And the first kind of challenge in the exercise will be treating the edges, mapping back across them, give them a little prominence, a little dark, thickening them up, and noticing the motion of the curves. An exercise into feeling how our position with the paper, position with our hand and the pen or the pencil bring connection to the shape. They guide it, they bring constraint to motion, and open up the character of the drawing, unique to its place. So a few rounds of tracing back across and feeling out, maybe in slightly different ways, how you form these edges. They may not track perfect. We get some wobbles and things. And that begins to thicken the edge, but also break it a little to not be too limiting in its crispness or precision. Little shadow gathering in the corner of something. A sketch to see shape. And as you work along these edges, you can begin to engage them with more presence of the body. Perhaps as the hand moves, you also move a little with the whole self, leaning a little back or rotating a little to the side. leaning a little forward, a light twist beyond the shoulders, just letting the action extend a little further beyond as you become comfortable working in these larger movements, intensifying that edge or separation between something present in the frame and something around it. With that well established, we make new decisions of what we see, composition. This frame could be in a wall, empty space here meeting the corners, exactly the actual frame set inwards to the view, or this could be already deep within, recessed, and the frame could set outwards. Both kind of similar approaches. I think I will bring the edges in just a little bit at the corners. A line kind of heading towards the center, but in a little bit of a curve, a little faking of some perspective. We're going to bringing in the corners of the box slightly. And depending on your page and the spacing, you could go out or in. Similar effect here, just in enough that we could kind of have a 1-point perspective, and now begin to trace a little bit of an offset around, again, making a new frame within a frame. For this one, I'm going to start entering into the breath, so if you like to follow along with that, slowly forming it, a lot of tracking previous lines with the eyes and tracking them with the hand at the same time. Letting that be a place of high presence, high engagement, perhaps working a bit slower. Choose a corner to begin with. Take a couple breaths to steady the hand, steady the mind. When you're ready, a good inhalation and a light exhalation as you begin to draw along an edge. The breath may run out depending on the size of your canvas. Take a new breath, begin again, or keep working through the inhalation and the exhalation. Just that offset to the edge, bringing some depth to the frame. Another breath when you're ready, or two to prepare. Finding the place to start. Engaging the diaphragm and the core and the ribs, and relaxing into the next motion of the line. Working our way around. Some of the longer edges may take a few breaths. Take your time. Notice the natural rhythm of that attention. Shaping yourself at the start, the exhalation, and tracking along, following the eye. As the breath wanes out, you may take a rest or keep moving, noticing the rhythm of the breath. Working from corner to corner, just offsetting inwards that frame. And not a real perspective, but a little feeling of moving in. We have this space clean and open towards the inside. You have the space open as a canvas toward the outside. I think I'm going to put a little bit of a lip around the whole thing. Just one more round of tracing around. Just a little to the outside, very thin edge. That same attention to the breath. Breathing in to start and exhaling with the motion. A little reveal to a heavy edge. Something set in to a surface. If this is a window, like we engage within a wall, it's always made of something. And that edge has to be built and placed within the wall. It's not just a hole. There become some layers of material. Tracking along can be a challenging exercise for the hand, for the steadiness of the link between the eye there. And if we get some bubbles, some wobbles, some crossovers or little jerks or gaps around, just breathe and begin again. Those small notches and inconsistencies will slowly fade into the overall image, will become part of the character for developing further outwards, experimenting and expressing from what we see. Now, as you look at it, take it in, let the eyes really sink into that space out of the window, considering what you begin to see. Maybe there's something in front of you or nearby that brings inspiration. Perhaps a couple of trees framing a view, an open, natural space. Maybe your mind goes somewhere else in its imagination, a landscape, outer space, any kind of scene that begins to come into your mind. Being enveloped in a window, sitting in a space, looking out somewhere. Hold that image for a little bit to get a sense of it. What are some of the features? Is there a horizon? Are there larger elements in the foreground? Small details at the edges? And beginning to draw into this frame, you should start closer, things that block the view perhaps, and work out further. I think I'll give a little natural scene for myself. Maybe a tree or something sneaking into the view at the edges. A tree could take many forms. I keep things here kind of light, not necessarily representational, just little flicks of the wrist to kind of make that feathery edge of something. A little heavy because it's close by. Kind of working the pen or pencil back and forth, letting the edge move in and out with the branches or needles, leaves, working their way around, but just the very edge of something, very edge of part of a tree, blocking off my view a little bit there to the right. Shaped first at the outer edge and then can work inwards. giving it more figure, kind of a light dashing of the hand, just riding or skimming the surface a little bit of the page, sometimes making full strokes, full lines, being mindful of the edge. Tree can't come inside, so it must kind of end at the framing. Or who knows, maybe the window's open and the tree can sneak right in, up to you in the drawing, but attention at the edge, the mindfulness of where we are in space, where we're holding our hand, balancing a technique of kind of lightness to give shape and tone on the page, with attention to the detail and either precision or safe margins of our actions. But whatever you're drawing, near or far, in or out, as the image develops, having it in mind where your pen or pencil is in space, how it begins to engage with the edges, the center, that territory framed by that first wrapping panoramic window. Something to establish a little bit of tone and value in the scene, to be separate inside and outside. And from there, a bit of an horizon for myself, something around that middle area, maybe working from just a little bit of an edge, bumpy out there in the distance. Perhaps slowly working from land, flat, to a little hilliness. That same light, tapping, kind of dashing stroke, just framing out an edge to the horizon. You always come back and add more, layer and wrap, giving us a place to start where the world drifts over, becoming sky. And maybe it's a little bit more intense. Mountains far off in the background. Seeing way out there something setting the scene or the panorama of the world. Perhaps a little bit of a moon or sun taking some presence in the sky. Again, light and dashing strokes at attention to both control and ease with the instrument. Not too crisp or hard, but building up value and separation through a little play and feeling out. And if you have some bumpy mountain areas, these can start to reach down into the foreground. Usually one shape taking a little precedent over the other, pushing into space, maybe forming beginnings of a valley. Very light off in the distance, just feeling out directionality. Depending on your experience of landscapes and mountains, not so much in drawing, but in seeing. We have some things with many gorges, folds and crinkles, others far, far away, just bumpy crops of rock and trees, giving them a little shape with that light, playful penness, seeing how they unfold and shape the landscape for you. Finding a way of holding the pen or pencil that brings some of that quick, playful lightness. A little dashing taps, not so much like a shaping or scraping, but just working loosely at the edges of something that might form in the mind. This starts to hold a little bit of a picture there. Maybe it's far below a little valley or river taking form. And as things gain momentum in their framing, you can bring more value and intensity to them. Maybe the mountains are high and have a small cap, a change of biosphere from rocks to trees, snow to visible earth. Finding edges that are in front or behind, just loosely shaping things. Something beginning to form, a scene through the window. And now we have a little foreground, a little background, some sky or earth between us out of this view to the surroundings. We can take a few minutes to just draw with it, perhaps add indications of little forests, towns, or changes in the out distance, just dashes, slightly vertical, little break in the horizon, leaking out into the space of the page, can make us imagine something there, something forming landscape. Could be simple fields that come into the foreground, roads, suggestions of paths, whatever your mind may start to see or the pen start to suggest. Both are ways into the drawing. Enjoy those few minutes of quiet imagining with the pen. As you let the hand, mind, eye, imagination start to run a little wild, find little things. Oh, that shape could look like this, or that area is very bare and could use a little fuzz, wiggle, or activity. Things pop into mind. This view at a distance, resolution and detail become less important, less of the goal of the guide, more a light suggestion, a playing with a little bit of motion, seeing with the imagination, and seeing if a little more there, a little more here can start to take shape in the mind to suggest things that may emerge on the paper. A way of letting it kind of leak out and form our imagination, but also inform the imagination. A back and forth or dialogue, play, letting the inspiration come from within as we open the mind to the conversation and the discussion within. And if it inspires more movement, more play, feel free to continue to draw, to move that hand with ease, searching lightly with the marks, slowly forming and coalescing into something recognized. Or let the frame hold the view for you. Take a few breaths with it, see what it could be leading to. And then take a few breaths to return back to your space, bring the hand to rest. Let it relax a little bit. Let it normalize back the other side. Bring them together. And release a final breath or two. Hearing it echo around the room, bringing you back into the three-dimensional space around you. Just a nice little made-up scene. Puncture, an aperture, a bridging of worlds through that framed window space gives us a place to start. Hopefully gives us a place to reference our own imagination, to remember scenes we've seen, perhaps out of a window in a house, perhaps through the windshield of a car. My own scene here of the mountains in the distance, the landscape unfolding, makes me think of road trips, especially in the southwest of the United States. Maybe get a little bit more north there in New Mexico, Colorado, some mountains in the distance, a place always reaching towards great heights, framing and breaking up that horizon. Little things here and there in the foregrounds, a new road to travel, a lake, a forest, and occasionally passing within an atmosphere. But mine here in some kind of vessel, a house, a room, a pod, perhaps a UFO flying in space, whatever the imagination begins to unfold there, keeps driving, informing, pushing the imagination to make those little marks, little suggestions of something in the distance, a little density there, a little emptiness here, to let us constantly reimagine, to unfold the mind into that framed wide panorama. And hopefully you can find some time and a little relaxation in this to keep working within the world you're creating there, to see where it might lead, what finer and finer details, new ideas, suggestions here and here can you let express through just that simple medium of a pen or pencil, that nice canvas, a piece of paper, and a little time, relaxation, breath, and attention to your own awareness and expression. But whatever unfolds in your own journey, in your own landscape there, I hope it brings you just a little bit of nice, expressive imagination time. Time for the self to unwind, to open up, to be ready for suggestions from the imagination. And I hope you can join along in future episodes. We have new ones that come up usually every Wednesday on YouTube here. And we do them live through Mindful Pratt via Zoom if you're part of the Pratt community of alumni and faculty and staff. I thank those who join every week. Coming up with new ideas for this really helps me kind of play and express and push forward ways to enter drawing through the imagination, but also through the body, through the presence, and practice some of my own techniques here and here. Something I get to do in a free environment every day, and hopefully you can find that free space too and take it with you wherever you might go. But if you like the exercise, give it a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments below what you discovered. Maybe even find a way to share a pic if you'd like on Instagram @RooksIsFun. And otherwise, take with you into the day some of this mindfulness and presence with what you create in any aspect of your life. So thank you all for joining, and draw well.